Hello everyone and welcome to the Constructive Criticism Network. This network is here to help you improve at Magic the Gathering at every level. From Pauper Leagues to Top 1000 Mythic, we've got you covered. If you want to hear the entire network, head on over to our sponsor at PureMTGO.com, where you can hear each and every show, each and every week, and check out their sponsor, MTGO Traders, and tell them that the CCMTG Network sent you. Now sit back, enjoy the show. From YouTube, podcasts, and more, here's this week's episode from ConstructiveCriticism.com. Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new episode of Mythic Cast. I'm your host Spencer, and I'm joined by a special guest. The guy that does everything. Lawyer, played on the SCG tour with a bunch of top eights, played on the Pro Tour. Dude's, a director. I think you're a professional comedian. At one point you did podcasts. Is there anything you don't do?
I don't work out a lot. I probably should do that.
Ballet? Do you do ballet?
No. I also cannot draw even a little bit. Like, I am absolutely horrible at it. Just horrible.
All right. Now we know new things about you. Trey, I'm really excited to have you on, and there's a high chance that it is because of the deck that we will be talking about today.
Yeah, that's super fun.
Which is Blue-Green Ramp, which has gotten some new toys, also some interesting toys, I might add, that we'll get to talk about. But before we do that, so let's talk to you about you. Tell the listeners about yourself. How did you start playing Magic? We already mentioned the Pro Tour, the SCG Tour. Like, what's your Magic journey, to your point in coming up to this podcast, in 10 minutes?
Well, okay. So I started playing Magic in 1994. I was 13 years old. It kind of sucks to me. Like, I hate that it's an experience that's not possible to have anymore. Like, a time when a game like Magic didn't exist, right?
Right.
Like, now most of the time people discover Magic because they were playing Pokemon, or they were playing, some other kind of card game, or they saw some other kids doing it or whatever.
Sure.
But like, in 94, I was like going to the comic book store to buy comic books, and I saw some people with this thing, and I'm like, what even is that? I don't even know. I've never seen anything like it before in my life. And I was obsessed instantly.
This is the first time I felt our age difference, by the way.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm super old. Yeah.
So, what comic book were you picking up?
I'm sure it was Fantastic Four or Spider-Man, probably.
Okay. So you're looking for the Spidey, and instead you go home with, what, a starter deck?
Yeah, I bought a starter deck, bought some packs, and then I spent, the rest of my high school time driving down to that same shop in Nashville every Saturday and playing tournaments, and seeing those tournaments start to get sanctioned, and then doing well in one of those sanctioned tournaments, and it was like, oh, this is, like, really fun.
Were you competitive before that?
What's that?
Were you competitive before that?
I played sports. So I started playing sports when I was 4. I played baseball and basketball, and I played baseball like spring league, summer league, fall league every year since I was 4. And so I was really competitive athletically, but I'd never done anything like this.
Okay.
And also in high school, I played a lot of chess. So those were kind of the things that I had done and around that. And
do you think?
I played.
Do you think that
Nintendo?
Do you think that that's fair? Do you think that that things like playing baseball, maybe in your young age, and like competing at that level, and even something like chess and like the strategic element of chess, do you think that gave you an advantage over your peers in Magic early on?
I think that it was definitely something that I took to it quickly. Like, it wasn't something that I had to try to figure out as much, because those elements of it, like the strategic elements of it, felt very familiar. The competitive elements of it felt very familiar, because I'd been doing like comic books and baseball cards and stuff like that. The collecting element of it made it familiar. Like, it made so much sense to me when I first saw it. It was astonishing to me that it didn't exist before. It was like, this just seemed like the logical conclusion of all of these other interests that, like, I don't know why someone had not made it yet.
Sure.
And then when seeing it, it was like, oh, this is what this is supposed to be. This is the way this hobby is supposed to be done.
Right. So you're winning these tournaments. Did you ever take a break?
Yes. So I played from the first set that I had come out and seen was Revised. So right when I started was Revised Limited, like Revised release, and I played from that through Weatherlight. And right around that time, I was going to college, and I never sold any of my cards. I never intended to quit. I never intended to take any type of a break. But Magic was a different thing then. Like there wasn't just a shop in every city and F&M every week. Like that just wasn't the norm across the country. Like if you went to kind of a smaller town, there just might not be Magic around.
Right.
And so I went to college in Jackson, Tennessee, in West Tennessee, and there wasn't really a shop, and there really wasn't a scene, and there really wasn't anything going on. And so for during the time that I was in college, I wasn't playing.
Is that
And
all of law school?
all of college and then all of law school. So from 2000 to 2007, I really wasn't playing. I played some other games. I would do some other stuff, but like there just basically because there just wasn't a Magic scene where I was,
Sure.
and there wasn't a Star City tour, and there wasn't any of this other stuff. Like the kind of the access to things that there is now wasn't there.
Sure.
And so because of the places of where I was living, there just wasn't a lot of stuff going on.
So what brought you back?
In 2007, I was graduated law school. I had taken the bar, and I was sitting at my best friend from high school's house, and we were watching football and drinking beer. And he said, "Remember when we used to play Magic in high school?" I was like, "Yeah." He said, "You remember when there were those kids who were 25 and they had all the best cards because they had jobs?" Yeah. He goes, "Well, we're 25 and have jobs." You get what I'm saying?
So what did that translate to? How much do you think you decided to spend off the bat?
So we went from that, we went to the Lorwyn pre-release in 07.
Okay.
And went to the Lorwyn pre-release.
It's a
played the
sharp
pre-release.
change from where you left.
Oh yeah, things are crazy now, right? Like,
you leave, and you come back in like one of the most complicated sets in the history of Magic.
yeah, but it was like absolutely perfect for a player like me, and it was absolutely perfect for that because it had all of the like the nostalgic tribes, it had all of that, stuff all going on in it.
You're like, elves got sweet.
Elves got sweet, fairies got sweet. Like it was like there was stuff happening, right? And like Lorwyn was a really fun time for that. And so I went to a pre-release, then I started going to F&Ms a couple of times, and then I bought like just obscene amounts of Lorwyn and Time Spiral and all of that stuff right around that time. And that was it. I just never stopped going after that. Like I started going to F&Ms, and then I started going and drafting, and then I started buying cards again. Then my buddy who had suggested it didn't really catch on to it the way that I had again, and so then I bought his collection out, and then I put a team together because Star City had started this, tournament series, and the early Star City tour when there was the 2 opens every weekend, and it was Standard and Legacy, and I put
and the draft opens.
Yeah, and then it was put a team together in Nashville, and we started testing, and we started traveling, and started going to all of those and playing the invitationals every year, and then I started going from doing that to doing content generation for Magic. I started writing articles, wrote article for Star City, and then left that and started writing for a different website, which was a local website, which was starting to try to build something, and then that went sideways for various reasons, and
Sure.
I kind of faded out of doing content creation, but kept playing, and then after I kind of had wound down from doing that Star City tour because a lot of the guys that I was testing with moved away. They graduated from their graduate school programs and, went their separate ways. I just was kind of content to just play, go to events when they were close, and I wasn't really doing it. And then I met this talkative little redhead kid named Mason.
I don't know that guy.
Yeah. And
he was on last week.
Oh yeah, so he was real fired up about wanting to do something and really wanted to put something together. And so with Mason, I kind of put a team together again.
Yeah.
And kind of helped him with that, and then that eventually led to us, testing together, traveling together. Me focusing on trying to do GPs and Pro Tour instead of Star City, qualifying for a Pro Tour and going, which was great. And then eventually us podcasting together with you, and then here we are now.
So, what do you think kept you going? Like, you're alone doing this. I mean, Magic in a lot of ways is this solo activity in a lot of ways. Like, it's you versus your opponent, but you're, you know, a lot of it's so much of yourself that we kind of build these communities around us, right? You know, to make it last longer, to share that enjoyment that you get during that activity with all of those people. I think that's one of the reasons the commander's so successful. So for you, what kept you going throughout you know this time where, you know, you had the success on the SCG tour, and all of a sudden, you know, it's like, well, you know, I can't really go to these SCGs alone all the time, but I'm still going to keep playing. Like, what kept you going?
Yeah, so it's weird. My relationship with gaming is really kind of strange, and it has a lot to do with my family and my family history. I don't know whether or not I've ever told this on any of the podcasts. I have no idea. I honestly can't remember.
I don't know either.
I don't know.
Here we go.
Yeah, so you know, my name is Trey, but it's because I'm a third, and so my namesake, my grandfather, was a pilot in the Air Force for 26 years. He was a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force. But so that also meant that he had had a full career by the time he was like 45.
Sure.
And he was retired my whole life. He just was sitting around the house. And he was a guy who had always done really physical things. He had not really done like any kind of hobbies that were sustainable once he started to get older and his body started to fail him.
Sure.
And I watched him go through that as a child, and it was really impactful to me. And he's the guy who taught me to play chess. He taught me how to play some other, you know, strategic like games that were focused on like, you know, military stuff that I didn't know anything about. Stratego.
Yeah.
There was one called Conflict. There was another one. We played Risk. We played, you know, but it was like these military strategy games. But he would always teach me up to the extent of his ability and then quit playing. Like he didn't do it for enjoyment. He was just trying to teach me stuff.
Sure.
But I saw the like purpose that it gave him when he would allow himself to game, but then he didn't think it was a worthwhile endeavor.
Sure.
And it's something that struck me when I was really young that like if you had a hobby like that, if you had something like gaming, that I would never be him. Like I would never be the guy like sitting there staring at the wall because I just don't have anything that I enjoy, and I don't have anything that gives me purpose, and I don't have anything that I can do anymore because the things that I used to do now I physically can't do anymore.
Right.
And so I dove into gaming like pretty hard and pretty deep, like as a reaction to that as a child. And then the secondary part of it is you kind of hinted at it, you know, in a joking fashion on the front end, but I'm a guy who does a lot of things. I was a litigation attorney. I run a film company. I've done stand-up. I have done a lot of these different kinds of things, and my mind is always kind of going in a bunch of different directions all the time. And as I got increasingly in these stressful situations as an adult, I found that Magic was literally the only thing I ever do in my whole life where I'm not thinking about other stuff. Like,
dude,
it
I'm the same way.
Yeah, it focuses me in a way like nothing else in the world does. And I'm not a good and normal person when I'm not playing Magic because I get too scattered, I get too distracted, I can't zero in on stuff. And it'll be stuff where like I'm like everyone needs to go away and I need to play Magic and then we'll be good. Like, and so those kind of the combination of those two things, which are not things that I necessarily actively knew when I was younger, but that's why I've played for as long as I've played and why I think I'll always play.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. That was, yeah. I think that it's somebody that like can personally relate to that. I've kind of expressed, I did a video a while back on being bipolar and like how Magic helped me with bipolar disorder in some ways. And that was something that I talked about, just like that it like one of the symptoms of bipolar disorder is just that I have racing thoughts all the time. And I think that one thing that Magic does is it channels those. Like it lets me think of all of the situations that I'm in the game, and it's really interesting to hear other people with that perspective where like Magic is the tool that kind of hones in something that maybe you that you wish was different about yourself, but you get to channel it into something positive.
Right. Yeah, exactly that. And I mean, that's something that I, not to get on like a big necessarily lengthy mental health thing, but that's a big part of a lot about who I am and what I've been able to accomplish is because I'm an inherently angry person, and I have been able to find ways to take that and realize that it's energy and utilize it in different ways And so then the Magic's kind of the same thing, but with racing thoughts, right? Like most of the time, I feel like my thoughts are going faster than I can keep up with, and that I'm trying to do too many things in too many directions all at the same time, and that I can get really overwhelmed with that sometimes. But then with Magic, there's so much information to process. It's like my thoughts can't keep up.
Right.
It's like there's so many tasks that you're trying to complete at one time, and instead of that being daunting, it's just extremely relaxing.
Sure. Well, once again, thank you for sharing that, and thank you for sharing this awesome deck with us that we're about to talk about.
Yeah, we're gonna have to take a real turn from the
Well,
place that took us to.
Before we do, before we take the turn directly into the deck, so you're really busy. Like this film thing for you is, I mean, it's taking you all over the country. You're a busy dude.
Yeah.
And you still were, you're still able to get Mythic when you want to do that. How did it come about this time? Like, was this deck just so good that it took you no time? Was this a little bit of a harder month to get Mythic?
So it was a little bit of the deck. It was really good. I was just winning a lot, and that was going great. But it was a second thing of I was having so much fun playing this deck
Sure.
that all of a sudden I was Mythic, and I didn't even realize that I'd been laddering. It was just one of those things that I was like, oh, okay, I'm at Mythic, and like week 2 of January, I
Sure.
should probably grind for like high rank but it wasn't a thing that I set out to like, oh, I'm going to get Mythic this month. It was like, I'm just going to play this deck, and I'm going to tinker with it. I'm going to keep messing with numbers. I'm going to do it, and I just kept having so much fun. I just played a lot of Magic, and it wasn't a thing that I really set out to do this month. It was just it's a blast to play, and I just kept doing it.
Well, let me pull up the deck here for the people watching at home. We have 2 Gilded Goose, 4 Leafkin Druid, 4 Risen Reef, 2 Eero, Titan of Nature's Wrath, 2 Thassa Deep Dwelling. That one is one that will be fun to talk about. 2 Wicked Wolf, 4 Cavalier of Thorns, 3 Agent of Treachery, 3 Nyxborn Agent, 3 Nissa Who Shakes the World, 2 Finale of Devastation, 3 Quasi Duplicate, 26 lands in the form of 4 Breeding Pool, 4 Castle, Garenbrig, 2 Castle Vantress, 7 Forest, 5 Plains, and 4 Temple of Mysteries. The sideboard has 3 Ether Gust, 1 Sorcerer's Spyglass, 1 Ashiok, 2 Lovestruck Beast, 3 Mystical Dispute, 3 Thrashing Brontodon, and 2 Wicked Wolf. Did I get something wrong here?
Yeah, it's 5 islands, not 5 plains.
Oh. Sorry, I've been playing a lot of mono white lately on Historic, so it's just top of mind. But I want to talk about something. I looked at this list, and I actually looked at the list that I'm playing right now and compared them, which was really interesting to do. So I'm actually playing Teamer version of this, but it's actually very, very, very different than the other stuff. You actually have a lot of the same things in the curve as me. So a good example of this is I'm obviously playing Omnath, my babe, and you're playing Wicked Wolf in that slot, and you're playing Gilded Goose, and I'm playing Arboreal Grazer in that slot.
Mm-hmm.
But you've also gone the Quasi Duplicate Nyxborn Ancient route, which is actually where I started as well. Talk to me about this deck. Like, how did we get to the Gilded Goose Wicked Wolf Nyxborn Ancient deck?
Yeah, well, so this started from a deck that Mason had played during the streaming event, where he was playing. It was all in on Nyxborn Agent and Quasi Duplicate and drawing a bunch of cards, and he was playing Fae of Wishes to go and get finales and doing all kinds of nonsense. Like, he was just trying to max meme on everything. And I played it, and it was fun and whatever, but it was also like terribly swinging and inconsistent and all the kinds of issues that normally come in when you're trying to max meme across everything.
Sure.
But the thing that I noticed as I was doing it is that just like the core engine of what was going on is outrageously powerful, and like in a way that shouldn't be happening most of the time, particularly with Nyxborn Ancient and Quasi or Nyxborn Ancient and Quasi Duplicate, because with the combinations of Castle Garenbrig, Nyxborn Ancient, and Quasi Duplicate make it where you can cast that and then copy it very quickly. Like, it just happens very quickly. And then if you combine that with a finale, like, so if you have Nyxborn, Quasi Duplicate, and Finale of Devastation, or Finale of whatever the card's called, Devastation, it's just a kill. Like, those 3 cards, it's just a combo kill, because if you Nyxborn, then use 1 island to Quasi Duplicate, and then tap 2 more lands, you'll finale for more than 10, go find another Nyxborn, and you're pushing in for lethal with trample damage.
Right.
And it all in one turn, everything has haste, and it's a thing that you can just kill people out of nowhere with.
Yeah.
But that fundamentally is powerful, but then that doesn't get you through a lot of the other stuff that's going on in the mid game or anything else. Which is where I started seeing a lot of the decks that were trying to mess with Thassa. There was the Teamer deck that was trying to do stuff with Thassa, and it was using Omnath and some of these other things. And so I wanted to stick with using the Nyxborn Ancient combo package, but then also trying to build around Thassa as a engine card as well, and try to see if I could make both of them work in the same deck to get kind of two sides of the same coin, to where you can play this like blink mid-range elementals type strategy that then also can just combo kill out of nowhere.
So so Wicked Wolf is there to bridge, right? Like, it's there to get in the way, both get in the way and also remove small creatures, so that you can get to the point where you can cast your Nyxborn Ancients.
Right.
So
and so that was also like, so I wanted things that had come into play effects to maximize what could happen with blinking of Thassa, and then also to make the quasi duplicates not dead in the mid game as well, right? Like, if you just have more come into play effects, then you get more impact off of being able to cast them on early turns. And so Wicked Wolf was basically filling the role that Omnath fills in the Teamer ways in a lot of ways. And then once Wicked Wolf is there, then Gilded Goose starts to make a lot of sense, because then you can get incidental food production, and you end up in weird situations too with the aggro matchups, where sometimes you'll just blink a Gilded Goose a bunch of times. And
I was going to ask if that came up.
Dude, I have done that so many times, where you're just like getting into a stalemate situation, and you're just blinking a Gilded Goose every turn, and then all of a sudden you have 10 food, and you play a Nyxborn Ancient, and then just pop all the food at one time, and it's like, all right, good luck, you know?
Where would Thassa have been in your pick 2 set review?
It would have definitely been probably my hopeful section, and I think it got there.
So it's a good. I mean, this card just it's the only one that basically never becomes a creature, but also it's fine. You don't need it to become a creature.
Yeah. It does with Agent of Treacheries. It can become a creature sometimes, but if that happens, you also are already just winning the game.
Right.
So it just doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, you only need the one agent to typically take over the whole thing.
Right. Yeah. Same kind of thing, because of quasi duplicates and Thassa. If you get an agent down, you like can play it, copy it, blink it, and it's like, all right, I get to draw 9 cards this turn, and it's your turn.
How good between something like Thassa, quasi duplicate, but Castle Ventress, is this deck? Does it use all of its mana?
Yeah, pretty much, most of the time.
Okay.
And it has a very good effect of like sinking in. I mean, you can have dead turns where you've just like, okay, I've flooded out and I've drawn, mana, dudes, and lands, and I don't really have anything else going on.
Mm-hmm.
But because of the quasi duplicates, because of the Thassa, and you end up, and even the Uros, like, you end up with these mana sinks throughout the course of the game that are really useful. I mean, Thassa is primarily there for blinking, but like, her activated ability, the tap ability, comes up a lot, and especially with having Nyxborn in the deck, like getting to the point that you can like have it and play it, and then all of your mana makes triple mana. You can just survive for forever to assemble the rest of the stuff that it is that you need to go on, because you can just tap everything they do every turn.
Right. So where does this deck kind of rank for you in Standard right now? Like how obviously you got Mythic with it, obviously you kept working on it. We see these mono red decks coming in. We see the Rakdos deck. Like the format has certainly got more aggressive than it was in the last format. Is that something that this deck worries about?
Yeah, I mean, the hyper-aggressive decks can definitely be a problem, and this build is different than the build that I had initially, in an attempt to try to come around on some of that, with things like Wicked Wolf, with things like, Gilded Goose, as opposed to Grazer, to like just be able to do things like make food and gain life, and try to have some additional pieces that are there. But, you side a lot of this stuff out against the aggro decks.
Yeah.
To try to lean into
that mid-rangey style.
Mid-rangey style stuff to get there and kind of bridge things over. But yeah, I mean, the really hyper-aggressive decks can get under you. But they also, it's kind of a traditional like paper, rock, scissors in standard right now with that, because I don't think
Right.
that they're great against like the Jund decks and some of the other stuff that's going on.
Sure. You actually have a lot of cards for something like mono red in your board. Can you talk to me about your sideboard and where you're bringing stuff in?
Sure. So, I mean, for mono red specifically, I would be bringing in all the Aether Gusts, the Love Struck Beasts, and Thrashing Brontodons, and the Wicked Wolves, and basically cut all the 7-drops and the Nissas,
Okay.
and one of the quasi duplicates, and just get lower, because whatever, Cavalier's going to kill them. Like, you're not going to need to worry about how you're going to finish the game with them.
Right.
It's just a matter of like running them out of resources and surviving, and then all of your stuff is still, even with that kind of configuration, bigger than their stuff.
Sure. That makes a lot of sense. Is that the case for some stuff like Rakdos? I mean, obviously, one of the nice things about Thrashing Brontodon is that it really just fills so many roles as a sideboard card. I assume that Ether Gust is doing that same kind of thing.
Oh, for sure, for sure. It comes in a lot. If it's like the Rakdos sacrifice decks, it's possible that depending on what the configuration is, that I would want Ashiok or Spyglass, just because Spyglass is quite good against Witch's Oven,
Sure.
or the Chandras, depending on what's going on. And being able to eat their graveyard is useful. But it just depends on what the configuration is. But yeah, for the most part, still, it's going to be Thrashing Brontodons and Wicked Wolves are coming in a lot against any of those aggro matchups.
Okay. Is blue-eye control is kind of the talk of the town in a lot of circles right now. Is this something that you just get under them with between your ramp and they're just not going to have enough resources?
Well, here's the problem, I think, with the blue-white control decks, and is that they play a lot of stuff. They're not as much of like a counterspell sit back on their stuff deck. Like, they'll
Right.
try to do that in the early turns, and during those turns, you're playing things like Risen Reef and Leafkin Druid that, okay, great, you counter any of that stuff, I don't care. It literally doesn't matter.
Right.
Because the game's going to go long anyway. So you have to really construct your game plan against them about holding back a lot of your bigger pieces until they play something, like, play one of their sagas, or one of the guys, what is it, Archon of Grace, that thing, or an Elspeth or something, or they play
Right.
something out like that. And then, I mean, if they do that and they tap low, I mean, with the combo kill, you can just kill them in response to having done that a lot of the times.
Sure.
But so you have to really be careful about it. You do have to sandbag against them. You do have to hold stuff back, but they are at some point going to have to put pressure on you. You can operate in the sense of just like, you don't have to put pressure on them, because you can end the game instantly if they get to a point that you need to. If you're just sculpting your hand, constructing that stuff, and the game going long and you just getting more mana, it just gets to the point where you can bait stuff around, where
Right.
you can play a Nissa that they're going to counter, and then follow that up with a Nyxborn, and then copy and do stuff, if you're going to structure the game around going long.
Sure. Is there a matchup that you're trying to avoid with this deck?
I mean, I really don't want to play against mono red. I mean,
Fair
mono
enough.
red is, yeah. I think that mono red is in a position where mono red is good against the Simic ramp decks and not really great against anything else. I think it's, it functions as mono red functions, but I think that Simic ramp is its best matchup.
Okay. Is there anything that you think that people should just, like, if they're going to pick this deck up tomorrow, what is the thing that they need to remember in mulliganing or in sideboarding? Like, what is the biggest percentage points that you could give them right now?
Yeah, so a couple of big things is that I think that one thing that people do when they pick this deck up initially is that they mulligan too aggressively, because they want their hands to look like normal Magic hands, and that is just not going to happen. Like, if you have a hand that's like 4 lands and a Leafkin Druid and a 7-drop and a quasi duplicate, it's like, snap it off. Like, that's what you're signing up for, to do this kind of thing. And that one of the things that took me a while to realize and to learn is that the quasi duplicates are an awkward card. And so don't be afraid to fire them off early. Like, if you can use them to copy a Risen Reef, I've used them to copy a Goose, I've copied a Leafkin Druid, like, because you get both sides of it, right?
Right.
And you don't need all copies of it. Like, if you don't have a thing to do on a turn and you can get some value out of just firing it off, fire it off. Like, it doesn't
Sure.
matter. And that wasn't something that I came to easily, but it's a big it's a big impact. And that you want to trigger just Risen Reefs and Cavaliers as many times as possible. And so, like, when making decisions on a given turn, it's like, well, I could get this Nissa down and I could do this, or I could trigger Risen Reef twice by playing this Cavalier, then you probably should play the Cavalier. Just to maximize the value you're getting to push towards the end game at every turn. Also, Nissa is not a Sacred Cow in this deck, more so than it is in a lot of the other decks that it's ever been in. And it's that not being afraid to side that card out. Like, if you play against mono red, side it out. You play against mono white or Rakdos or something like that, like, Nissa doesn't have to be in the deck. Like,
sure.
If turning a land into a 3/3 isn't going to really help you, then fine, get it out of there. Like,
makes sense.
And that's something that, again, it took me a while to figure out.
Is there a matchup that you really want to hit? Like, this is what I want to play against.
I like playing against control a lot, and basically anything mid-range. Anything that's trying to value you, they can't keep up. Like, it's just, you do so much and make so much. Like, as soon as you start making your lands make triple mana and then 6 times mana or 9 times mana, it's preposterous. Like, nothing else can keep up when you're triggering, like, Risen Reefs 3 times a turn and blinking a Cavalier at end of turn. Like, anything that's trying to value you has a tough time dealing with this.
Awesome. Trey, where can people find you to ask you questions about this deck?
Best place is on Twitter at TreyMC.
Yeah, you can find the podcast at Arena Mythicast. You can find me at 13H. Before we go, though, Trey, I just want to say thanks for coming on, man. Like, I also appreciate you just allowing me to go with this and not do show notes this week. Typically, I send my guest show notes on this show, but I was like, you know what? I think I want to hear Trey's voice a little bit longer. I want to take it in. But I really appreciate you coming on, man, and also talking about a deck that just legitimately looks so fun, that is kind of a breath of fresh air compared to... I mean, for me, like, when Hydrate Crisis was spoiled, for example, you know, this is the kind of deck that I was envisioning playing it in, and the fact that it, like, ended up in that Sultai mid-range deck and, like, that became the best deck for a minute, and I just wanted this deck for years, and it's really fun to, you know, get to take all of these pieces that I love and watch people doing well with them.
Yeah, man, it's a lot of fun. And you mentioned Crisis. One interesting note on that is that there's no Crisis.
There's no Crisis.
But there was.
Right.
I had it in the list earlier, and I ended up in this weird situation that every time I had it in my hand, I never wanted to cast it. I wanted to cast other spells.
Right, you had other stuff. Right. Yeah.
And I kept doing that, and I played like 50 games with it in the deck, and I'm like, I never want to cast this spell every turn. Why do I do it here? It was so hard for me to let go. It's
hard to believe that this is not the deck for that card.
I know.
It's true.
I still can't convince Mason that it's not. He's like, there should be Crisis in here. I'm like, you never want it. You never want to cast it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have gone down to, I think there's 2 in my current list. Obviously started with way more. It's just, it is. I agree with you that, you know, you just when I had the Nyxborn Ancients like you do, I have moved away from them since then. But it was like, I can't possibly do this for, like, sure, I'm going to win this game by casting this Crisis, but I could have won this game with anything. Like, that's the real thing, is like, it didn't actually matter that this was the Hydroid Crisis, and I never would cast it until there was an Nyxborn in play anyway. So it's like, well, at that point, do I even need this, or can it just be anything else?
Right. And yeah, one final note on this too. You win a lot of your games by just casting Finale of Devastation.
Right.
Like, that is your primary win condition, that you're just going to cast Finale of Devastation for 10 or more and win.
Yeah. Well,
and
Trey,
you almost always get Nyxborn because it has trample. Like, that's almost always what you tutor.
Right. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I think that, I mean, this deck is just sweet. I encourage the listeners and the viewers to try it out. Once again, Trey, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you so much to our sponsor over at puremtgo.com, and don't forget to check out their sponsor at MTGO Traders. Trey, anything you want to say before we go?
No, thanks for having me. It was fun. You know, getting back in the booth, as it were.
Yeah, I didn't even make you do an ad read.
Oh, I know. And I was gonna make a joke and you started to do that, and I would have totally gotten it wrong.
Because you would have made an Oasis game show.
I
thanks again for coming on, man. Don't forget that like button. Don't forget that sub button. We appreciate everybody watching and viewing, and we'll see you guys all next week. Wait, actually, no. Hold on. I need to say this because that's not true. I might be taking a break from Mythicast for a little bit. I just left my main podcast, Constructive Criticism, and I am considering kind of the future of Mythicast and what it means. There will at least be a break, and I will keep it updated on the Twitter.